Working budget meeting, September 24th, 2019. Welcome to everybody for being here. At this time, you'll stand for a moment of silence and then the pledge. I pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item number one is the adoption of the agenda. I do believe that since this is a scheduled meeting, and schedule it first, if somebody does want to add something or something, we can add to it, I believe. I think this is a scheduled meeting anyway, so.
Mr. Chris, there was an item, a ramp or something. Did you get it?
I don't think we've got the, I don't have the figures on it yet to put in front of you to tell you how much it's would be. So I can't.
Gordy, is there a way we can add to go into closed session and deal with this?
It's going to be less than 20.
I'm assuming we can add a closed session, can't we? I mean, I would need to, we have the, for the reasons, I mean, we have to state the reason why we're going in. I mean, we just have to state the,
With
the
personnel,
number.
legal, personnel or possible.
I'm not sure what that number is right offhand. I don't have it.
60, I can go get it.
We can. I can look it up or whatever it is. I mean, if she doesn't find it right there.
Couldn't we go into the closed session 1st of September? KRS 61.810. Is that
810, but what is that,
turn it closer?
lead to them?
Litigate.
No, that might be the wrong one.
I mean, Ashley's asking for it, ask her if that fits what she's looking for right there.
Here. 61.810.
Well, 61.8 is that you just gotta get those subsections of which one of those. I mean, it has to, you know, where it falls and
It's right here.
like these right here, like 1C is this, 1E is this, 1F is this. Probably this one, I would say, is what she's, but I don't.
Yes. Yes. 1F. 1F.
Yeah.
Is that what we're,
61.810.
18, but it's subsection 1, right? Subsection F is what we're looking at?
Correct.
Subsection.
Discussions or hearings which might lead to the appointment, discipline, or dismissal of an individual
Is everybody
employee,
good?
member, or
Is
student.
everybody good with that? I have at least 3 people that are okay with that.
Yes.
All right, we'll add that number 7 to KRS 61.810, subsection 1F, and discussions or hearings which might lead to appointment, discipline, or dismissal of individual employee, member, or student. And we'll go over all that is there. Any other changes for additions, subtractions? If not, I'll ask for an adoption of the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Talby. Is that Ashley?
Yeah.
Okay. Second by Ashley. All those in favor say aye. Were there any public comments? I don't see anybody, here, so. Under Student Support Services, item number 2, consider adoption of 2010-2020 working budget. Alicia, I guess you want to present that?
All right, so I put a PowerPoint together just to kind of walk you through the steps of the working budget and also show you the differences between actual of last year, which at this point is still unaudited. That will be finalized on November 15th to the current working budget and the tentative versus working most of the changes we talked about in that first meeting of September, what was gonna change. So there's no major changes from that meeting.
It's shining in the speed.
Did you want to,
I'm sorry.
did you want to address the board?
Possibly, yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean,
Is it too late?
well, I mean, we're just getting started right there, so I mean, I'm okay if everybody else on board's okay, because we get started.
I'm sorry.
You tell me what you think.
You're okay, come on up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We'll,
Are you done?
Yeah.
Cause she's not,
I'd like to be.
she's not done.
That's it.
She's just getting started, but,
You
okay.
are good to her. No.
She's still got more time coming.
I know some of these people here. No, Mike Rogers here. I know it's what she wanted to take there. Thank you all for letting me come here and say a few words. And I'm just here to sing your praises tonight. I'm not here to take anybody to task for anything. I'm just here beaming with pride for the decisions that a lot of people in this room have made, and a lot of people that aren't here no more that have made to give us this gem of a facility out here. I said gem, it's not done yet. GEM of a facility that's just absolutely, everywhere I go, the community is just beaming. They're just so prideful and just so grateful. And even people in other communities are just like, wow, what's going on there? And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge and thank everyone in a public setting for all that you all have done and will continue to do. And it just makes me so happy to see what can happen when people come together. So I'm here representing myself, and it's just thank you all. And I look forward to seeing the rest of the project completed. And thank you so much for all you have done. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
That goes out to you as well. So.
Just here.
All right, you're back up, Alicia.
Sorry.
That's all right. That was good work.
Oh, this is fun.
All right, so back to it. Like I said, we talked at the 1st of September about the changes and those that we already knew were coming down the pike. We have approved the real and personal property tax rate at 63.7, so that increased our revenues from the, that we had actually already budgeted, what we thought would be the 4% rate, excuse me. And so I just tweaked that a little bit based on what PVA actually came in. It actually was 3.03% increase from prior year, so that was a big jump in PVA that made those tax dollars go up along with the 4% tax rate. So that's what's reflected through here. The first couple slides is a summary of all revenues. We've got general fund, special fund, which is our grants, district activity, capital, food service. It's kind of just a summary of all of those, and then it gets into more detail about just the general budget. Is there any area you all are wanting to hit on specifically? Any slide? Assume you don't want me to read through every one of these.
No.
You've had the chance to read
Yeah.
them, so.
Could you, on slide 10, just review that beginning balance?
Yes, so at the tentative level where we were sitting at the time, we thought, taking historical averages and just kind of looking at it that way, we thought we would hit the 12 million mark. But obviously you see after we've ended the year, we did not hit that mark. It was 9.992 and 421 is where we actually hit at this point. Again, that is an unaudited number. It is subject to change based on anything the auditors may pick up, and will be final for the November 15th, but right now, the way we rolled the year over, that's where we came in, or where we ended last year at. Which means we ended up spending more than our average of what we normally averaged, historical averages. And a lot of that, we actually rolled over encumbrances. So essentially, the budget from last year, this is a bit confusing. We encumbered money on last year's budget, but it didn't get paid out last year because we didn't have invoices, or the project wasn't done at the time, or something to that nature. So essentially, those purchase orders, those encumbrances have rolled over into our new year because we will end up paying them out in this fiscal year, but the budget rolled with it. So that kind of makes your budget go up for next year, and that's a lot of when you see departmental changes when we get to the expense side is encumbrance moving forwards. And that's part of that beginning balance number as well.
Was there any number that surprised you?
Honestly, no. No, there wasn't. So any questions on revenues? We'll move on to expenses. So the expense side, as I said, the major changes there, which we did put this in the tentative, you all gave a 2% overall raise to your certified and classified staff, and then set a minimum hourly rate at $11.32. That was factored into the tentative budget before it was submitted to KDE. It was not on the documents you were given that night of the tentative meeting because you approved it in that night. Okay, so there was a new version of the tentative budget submitted to the state because you gave me the directive to increase that payroll number. Also with that, our classified retirement rate, again, went up 12% this year. We were at 21.48% last year. It's 24.06% this year. Every year, we get a step raise based on years of experience. And we also increased the Section 6. When the allocation was approved in May, we funded in the tentative budget at a 90% level. But due that all schools met their enrollment, we typically give them that extra 10% to get them to 100. So that is in the working budget. And then also, as I just said, the encumbrances have added to expenses going forward.
If I could ask a question on
Yes,
that
sir.
last point. So there are expenses in fiscal 2020 that are essentially from 2019.
Yes.
So that would mean that the contingency we left 2019 with should have been higher to provide for that. Is that correct? Okay.
So in that, and we'll kind of touch on that when we get to the slide towards the end. I'll make a comment in regards to that. But as far as going through here, I tried to lay out your personnel expenses last year to current budget cycle, and then tentative to working. There's just minor changes in that when you get from tentative to working. So essentially, departments have the ability to redirect their funds that were originally budgeted for purchasing purposes, for PO encumbrance. If they so choose to re-budget those, essentially is why you're seeing a difference in the tentative and working budget payroll on slide 18. There was 40,000 increase in personnel cost and 10,000 in benefits, and that is due to some schools giving extra hour, half hour to staff to get them to an 8-hour mark that is not their current contract. And then also a maintenance grounds worker was rebudgeted to add that to help with the facilities. So those are the changes in payroll from tentative to working.
79% that we were talking about earlier.
So typically payroll is around the 80% mark, and you can see that on the working budget. We're right at 79.7% payroll on our budget. So that is within reason of what typical budgets are.
I would add that's probably low compared to most budgets.
So if you go to the next couple of slides, there's, again, everything is actual versus working and then tentative versus working. And I've divided out the next couple of slides by object codes, which is our spending, our personnel, benefits, and then the different categories of the purchasing marks. And then I've also divided it out by the function department so that you could see that as well. But the bulk of this increase, as I said, is due to purchase order encumbrances being rolled forward that increased our expense budget from what was at the tentative level. And then we've added those Section 6 dollars. The board has already approved in this new school year GRC literacy, I think it was literacy books for almost 86,000. You approved stroke parking for 7,800, and then the Aero coding demo, the 87,750 that was approved just last week. That is part of this budget, expense budget, the difference between tentative and working. Any questions there? Okay, so slide 23, this is a summary of actuals of how we actually ended up bringing in revenue and then what was spent out expense-wise in that physical year. So we took beginning balance out, we took contingency out, and we took our on behalfs, that's just the wash entry on the revenue and expense side. And this is true revenues collected versus expenses expended out in that year. So the very first year, I just kind of want to make a comment of how each of those years ended. The very first year was discovered when I walked in the door. Our certified staff got a new way of how they reported retirement. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time talking tonight. So retirement got a new program of how they reported that. It's called Pathways. And in that year, they wanted a certain field in our Munis system to have the annual salary rate for all of our subs and certified. So subs are paid a daily rate, but retirement wanted to see if they worked a full contract, what would that amount truly be? And so this was in the reference field, but what happened in that budget year, that cycle, when we went back and reviewed it, trying to figure out how did we end the year 2.7 million to the good, that's a lot of money left over when we thought we had, budgeting issues at that point. So that was what was discovered, is all of those annual salaries for those subs was put into the budget. Well, we don't pay them that amount of money because they get paid a daily rate just based on when they sub for us. But inadvertently, because of how it was had to be changed in our Munis system, and then they pulled and were still doing manual payroll budgeting at that point, that extra almost $2 million is what got budgeted for payroll and made payroll really high. We were like, I think at 86% that year or something in budget for payroll, and then we ended with a large chunk of money left over, and that's what occurred that year. The next year over, that was, the board gave that mid-year raise on October 29th. They gave a 3% to certified and 4% to classified. And so that makes expenses go up even from the prior year, because you see the prior year you only spent $35,000, then you spent $38,000. Well, a huge chunk of that was payroll, because you gave a pretty large raise that year. And then continued into the next year. Also, we broke out those steps on our salary tables in the 17-18 school year. We used to have buckets of time on our payroll schedules, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, and for those 4 years, the employee got the same pay rate. And that year, we made the decision to break that out so everyone in the district would get a step raise every year. So that was part of the increase of expenses that year. And then also, you all committed $6 million out of your contingency over to the athletics complex on that year. So that's the huge chunk of increase in expenses that year. And then the 18-19 school year, we, if you remember, also gave a 2% certified rate, 4% classified rate, a minimum rate of $10. CERS also went up that year. And we were budgeted, so if you kind of flip to slide 24, I want you to look at, again, this is an unaudited number, but I want you to kind of compare actual 18-19 of how we ended at this point to what our working budget 18-19. We were projecting a deficit of 1.2 million based on our budget. So, you know, with what we had at the point, at that time, this time last year, what we thought the budget was gonna be, we were 1.2 projection. But as you can see from actual numbers, we really came into the good $361,000. So a budget, I just want to make a reminder, a budget is our best guess of what we have to work with right now. It is not the actual 100% what we're going to end the school year in. So I know that the budget, when you're looking at it this year, we're looking at a deficit of 1.9. Again, this is talking current year. We're not talking beginning balance and what's sitting in contingency at this point. We're just talking straight revenue brought in for the year and what we're projecting to spend out for the year. And it looks like we're going to be 1.9. But as historical shows, we always bring in more revenues than we project. And most of the time, we don't spend 100% of what we budget to spend. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Any questions? And the biggest bulk of the difference between the tentative where we set in May and now the working at the 1.9 versus the 1.2 million at the tentative level are those encumbrance carry forwards. It's increased our expense budget, whereas we've not adjusted our revenue budget for the current year. So that's kind of the summary of the working budget where we stand right now. In general fund, I've also walked through Fund 2, these are all of our grants that have been confirmed at this point, because we try not to budget till we know exactly what they are, because we don't want to take the chance of spending something we may not get. Fund 22 is district activity. There is no budget in that because those are as money is swept up and it's budgeted in the year that it's sent up to us, and so far nothing's been sent up to budget this year. So it's just rolled over from prior years. Our capital funds, which are driven by our tax dollars and our SEEP formula. So capital outlay, there's slide 31, gives a synopsis of how you come up with that. And you can see the portion that's committed for debt service and then what is left over for fund transfers or essentially capital funds requests. But back on May 28th, the board has already committed those extra funds for the projects we did this summer with paving and blacktopping and everything. So all capital funds are expended at this point. Building fund is 100% committed to debt service. I'm going too fast, just slow me down. Construction funds, we have no current new projects in 2020, so there is no budget in 360 right now because those are only budgeted in the year a project is started. Fund 400 is a synopsis of last couple years of actuals versus working and then tentative and working. We did get a letter that the sequestration rate for bonds that we have federal funding on has gone down, meaning the government said at some point, okay, we don't have enough funds. The districts who have these bonds have to pick up a percentage of it. And those have changed over the years, and it's down to 5.9% for this year that we're getting ready to, we're in right now. It was 6.2% for last year. And then there's a list of all of our current bonds at the moment on page 40. And then you get into Fund 51. No major changes there. The budget is up tentative versus working, and that's just because they were trying to wait even at the tentative level in May. They hadn't finished out the school year last year, and last year was our first full year of a CEP program, which has changed the revenue sources for our food service. We're more heavily funded on federal dollars now with that program. And so they were just trying to wait to see how they actually ended the year, and so they've adjusted their working budget to match more with how their actual last 2 years have ended. And that is all the funds. Any questions? I know you have questions, Mr. Hudson.
Is it possible in the details of the budget, or even the summary, to identify what items of the encumbrance, if they have a special coding that lets the reader know that it's an encumbrance item?
No, when it rolls over, it rolls straight into the exact budget code that it was budgeted out of last year. So like on general fund, Like that code stays consistent in every year. So it's just rolling it over into that same budget code for this year that it was numbered in last year. So it's not like a special code anywhere. But if you go back and look at in the July meeting, when I gave you the June general ledger, what do you call that report? I just went blank. I'm sorry. The general fund budget summary report that you get every month. In July, you got the June one, and it shows a list of all those encumbrances. There's a column of encumbrances, and it was a little over $1 million at that point when we pulled that report. And so some of those have gotten closed out and booked back to June. We actually pay them in July and August, but per the audit, if it was truly a June expense, we do a journal entry and move it back to June and make it hit the June. So when that report was pulled, we still had $1 million in encumbrances open. When you look at the difference from our tentative budget to where we're sitting at on our working budget, it's about $855,000 difference with the encumbrances, meaning that stuff will get paid at this point because it didn't get finished until July and August and September now. So that's about a $200,000 difference that we booked back into June as expenses that really truly did end up rolling forward. Just kind of a journal entry on the GL system.
Certainly with encumbrances and the way things go through the community services line item, it gets confusing, but I guess at the end of the day, we could look at what the projected contingency is going to be, and I believe it's called $8 million, what we think will end the year. That really boils down to what we think, where we think we're going to end up. In the working budget, I know we talked back a month ago about the growth teachers that were added. Are those growth teachers, is that expense included in the current working budget?
No, sir.
Do you have an approximate cost of what that would be?
It's about $800,000.
Yeah, 800,000, 801.
Okay, so if we think we're at 8 million right now, let's call it 7.2 million is where we might end up. And that's 7.2 million to June 30, 2020. And kind of like a bank balance, but not really. It's sort of kind of maybe a bank balance. And as we've talked about in the past, the way tax revenues come through, we've got to make it from June essentially to November, where we've got SEEK money coming through, but not tax money. I'm just trying to get an idea of how much, from a cash standpoint, we need to reserve for that. And I'm thinking maybe $2.5 million or something like that.
I would suggest at least 3 between payroll and accounts payable, just kind of having that. I will say, we have one large bank account. We don't have it broken out into separate bank accounts for each fund. We have one bank account at the bank. So right now with bond money, that helps to make our bank account look larger than it really is, but that is committed to construction projects. So obviously, we know we won't spend those all out right this minute. But it is good practice to at least have, in my opinion, 3 to 5% contingency, which is, that 2% mark for us is about 1.2 million. So we want to be higher than the state requirement, in my opinion. And like he said, cash flowing. We pay out payroll when everyone is getting a paycheck, not just summer. It's almost $1.2 million on payroll.
So that might put us next October 2020 at about 4.2 million in terms of what our running contingency might be. And then it we need to look a couple moves ahead. Do we have any idea yet? We'll spitball what 2021 might look like, or
Hopefully, because of the need of the growth teachers, that you're going to see an increase in SEEK funding
Well, you
because
should.
of the intent of the additional 100.
That'll
Included.
catch
always a year
up
behind.
the next year.
Yeah, so we've had a very
That's
large
kinda run-
growth added positions, but students have driven that. So that means our ADA numbers
Should
should
go up
be
next
up, which then at that point drives our SEEK up for next year. So we should see an increase in SEEK dollars next year. Again, if the board is so willing to also increase taxes again next year, you would see that revenue source. But also, just one example is our preschool, you know, their numbers are even up from this prior year, and that drives the preschool grants that we get. So, I mean, we're always a lag behind on that too, so you're gonna see grant increases as well. ADA numbers also drive a lot of our federal title monies. We'll see more title monies probably next year with numbers up. So the ADA number drives a lot of things of how we get funding. So if you see those numbers increasing this year, we will reap those benefits next year.
So let's say that 800,000 is a timing issue, we take that off. So it still gets us back to, we're sitting at a $2 million deficit right now. It was 1.2 million. I mean, we've got to be able to try to project what the year after that might be. If we just assume we were going to do 4% on the revenue side, and then we do our normal raises, I mean, how long will it take us to dig ourselves out from this negative
I've
hole?
not calculated that far out.
That's the part that
Right.
concerns me,
Yes.
you know, I really, you know, thinking ahead to then, we've got 4.2 million, but if we continue to run $1 million deficits every year, not a $2 million deficit, just take only $1 million deficit, it won't take very long until that's gone.
It will disappear quicker than we probably think.
That's my big concern.
This has been said before, and I will say it again, there is going to have to come a time that we do the tax raise and not do a payroll raise to get ourselves caught back up. You continue to do payroll raises every year, as much as that is very much appreciated by everyone in the district, and we thank you for that. At some point, you're never going to get yourself caught back up, because that is part of what our deficit is payroll. And we're adding positions with the athletic complex coming online. So when you start adding positions, we've added SROs for safety. So between added positions and payroll raises, that does make you heavy on the payroll side. Again, you're still within a good percentage of your whole entire budget, but that's a reoccurring expense that's never going to go away. It's always going to keep increasing for you.
And that reflects back to when we raised our expenses, but we didn't raise our revenue.
Any other questions?
Anybody else have questions? Mr. Christie's, your recommendation to approve the working budget as presented? I'll entertain a motion for that.
I'll make that motion as presented.
Motion by Mr. Talby,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Richardson. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Hey.
We have 4-1. Item number 3, consider approval of synthetic natural turf options for baseball, softball fields. Mr. Christie?
I gave you all some information that I gathered. Obviously, if you get on the internet, you can find research to support about anything you want to prove, but I gave you what came from our construction management, our architectural folks, and our providers, some comparisons. I will tell you that, Mr. Talby, I did look at several, not just the calculator that you sent me, but several others. My problem with that, as I said in the email that I sent you, is it's so difficult for me at this point to go back and determine the number of hours that you have to look at the hours that coaches, booster organizations, private individuals, our maintenance people, our costs, and I wasn't able to accurately do that, and therefore I felt like the numbers that I was getting out of the calculator weren't relevant to what we should be looking at. The papers that I gave you there shows what you could expect. I think there are some highlights on there, turf versus the grass. And I've got these guys that can give you more updated figures from what you saw on the last one. I think that brings it closer together than what we were the last time.
Is that new that's been
That's the-
projected? Is that last week?
That's
last
week.
week. You've got newer stuff now, or?
Oh, it's coming in as we're sitting
Yeah.
here, so.
Yes, we do have some newer.
So I'd like to, if you allow me to allow these guys to present you with some newer numbers, that'll give you a better reflection. I mean,
Okay. Let me do this, so, kind of summarize this. So last week, when we were talking about this, we had these numbers as being only our estimates based on research we were doing and looking at what would happen with artificial turf infield and then the outfield, and then the sod outfields, and it did not take the artificial turf, obviously. Okay. The big thing that's happened, the big change, I guess, or when we're looking at these numbers, is we've got a combined number, a new number from Vesio, that just came in, okay? It shows that they're at 521,650, 521,650, and that is for the infield artificial turf and a sod outfield for both baseball, softball.
That's the total cost for both of them?
Right. Well, and with one exception, they have not been able to price the sand slit system
Okay.
for that
it's the regular
outfield sod.
drainage. It's the regular
Okay.
drainage.
Now, Lath has done a newer, updated cost opinion of that with what drainage is already out there and trying to tie into that and then adding that. And so where we had that higher number last week of like 230, he's thinking that's more like 100,000.
What are you talking about there? What number?
The sand slit.
Oh, the sand slit, okay, the sand slit.
So that
Okay.
takes us up to 621, 650 with that, no, that's an estimate
Yeah.
for the sand slit. I guess what I'm saying is that what we're seeing is that with the infield being turfed at two different heights, so the detailing of the turf is what's raising the price, okay, from what we had, at an earlier estimate we had gotten from Vesio that we were using for last week, okay? So we've been trying to provide better details and information to Vesio to price instead of them just trying to throw a number at it saying, oh, if this is what you want to do, this is what it would be, you know? So the infield number has gone up over what we estimated. And because of the volume and Vesio Sport, they're providing a turf, the overall number that we just got, I think I just shared with this, for all infield, outfield, baseball, softball, was $1,386,250. That was under our estimate that we had of like $1,460,000 last week. Okay.
1,000,003,
86,250.
and that's
Is
all
that
turf,
All
Sorry.
turf on both fields.
all turf,
turf.
all, both
All
fields.
fields.
Okay.
Anything missing from that we need?
Well, that's kind of a TBD, Mr. Colby. I mean, I need to go back and see and make sure they've picked up the bullpens as also being included in that number because they were kind of remote from the field. I think they should have because we sent them information to include that. One time we were just going to turf the mound in the bullpen. And then we started talking about, well, let's just turf everything in the bullpen.
Is the mound turfed on both
Yes.
as well?
Both.
Okay.
So essentially what I'm saying is that with the newest numbers we've received, the difference is $764,600. And that's still a little bit of a moving target over the sand slit system, but if you just looked at the comparison of what the new cost of the infield turf would be and the sod outfield versus all, last week we had like $1 million difference that we were talking about. I guess what we're sharing is we're more like $764,000, or this 764 as a difference. The consensus last week seemed to be that everyone, the coaches, everyone seemed to be very interested in an artificial turf infield. And then the sod was what was the difference between turfing the infields for both and maybe looking at the sod. And so,
Yeah, I think things change.
yeah.
I think we're kind of looking.
I mean, we're still looking at, and so the infield, if we were trying to look at, at turfing the infield and then doing the sod and the sand slit, that's where Vesio has that number of the 621. So you're still cheap, maybe not as cheap. I mean, we were looking at more like 500 or 400,000, 476, I think is what we had. And then comparing that to the 1,460,000.
On the softball infield over UK, where they've got larger budgets, I believe their infield is all dirt. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're all natural and soft, whereas baseball is also, except for the mound.
So, has there been any discussion with our softball folks as to whether they would like to have just simply a natural or a dirt infield? Not grass or
Right.
sodded, but dirt, that's what they've got in UK.
Well, they definitely, when we were programming, they definitely wanted the dirt versus any turf of any kind, any grass. And so we've now had a conversation with them as to whether they would stay with that, partly over Title IX. I want to be
Yeah.
careful and
Yeah,
caution you that having a situation where UK has the groundskeepers and the ability to manage that field, whereas the problem has always been and probably always will be with natural turf infields is the maintenance of those, especially with the rain event, and how you can play, immediately after any kind of storm. So, I mean, if you've got, if softball wants to stay that way, you probably need a letter for the file if the Title IX folks show up and start wondering why.
And we have a different coach than we had when we did the programming.
Well, that's going, because that's going to change all the
Yeah,
time.
and we just-
5 years from now, if you did it, and then you got people again that are coming back and saying,
Yeah.
why didn't you do this as well? So I think it's an issue.
Along those lines, when we, and thankfully, you guys were thoughtful enough to arrange for soccer space out there. If you recall at the time, they didn't want to be out there on the turf. That's changed.
So just to make sure I understand, we're looking at a difference of about $765,000
Right.
from going turf infield to sod outfield versus turf everything.
Correct. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
That's the magnitude of the difference now, based on the newer numbers we can get. I'll share with you that one of the other things that we'll be needing to do is that these numbers we're talking about, regardless of which way you go, we'll need a revised BG1. We'll need some help with indicating where that funding's coming from, because we'll be over our current contingency that's in the budget right now as part of the BG1.
I jotted down that, hold on, I interrupted anybody, that you said to sod the outfield and the artificial turf infield was $521,000.
And that was without the sand slit.
Last week, I think the numbers, what are they? 66,000 plus 180, are that the two numbers I added together last week?
Correct, plus the sand slit of 230.
230.
Well, but this 521 doesn't have the sand split in it, does it?
The 521 was not, that's correct.
Okay, so I don't know, we'll call that $240,000. So it was $240,000 last week, and it's $521 this week?
Yes.
That's a big daggum number.
I'll wait till next week.
Well, I think I know what I want to do this week based upon that number.
Well,
I almost took that term, but I mean, I think these numbers were prepared on a different
Yeah,
side.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
The weight of the turf itself has changed, I mean, there's been a lot of.
that's why, one of the things that happened with these numbers is when there was a request made of SEO to try to provide a price. And you've got to be careful when you do that, because when somebody puts a price out there for you, like my initial concern was that that price was only for the carpet itself. And somebody said, yeah, that's the cost of the turf. Because you really then still also have to have the drainage system, the gravel and everything underneath it. And And so now we've given them a design that did two things. One, it had all of that drainage, you know, which we had drainage under the infield for the natural grasses, but now you've got all the gravel that wasn't a part of that, that now is part of the turf. And I want to say that my understanding is that Vesio gave a number that was kind of a consistent turf that would be matching like what you have on the football field. And you would just be putting a ball diamond on that. That's not what we felt you really wanted if you were going to turf this. So Leif, Michael got involved, and I'll let you kind of share what the spec actually has.
Yeah, what we wrote the spec around is something that you're seeing more typical in baseball fields across the nation. We look at two different turf heights instead of just one turf height, where your skinned areas or your dirt areas, clay areas are the same height as everything else. And if the ball hits those, it's going to act the same as if it hits the grass area. In a real baseball field, we all know that that's not the case. Softball field, ball coming off the infield is going to be a lot different than a ball coming off of the grass infield. So what we did is we tweaked the design to more of a performance, to where to perform more like a real natural grass baseball field. And in doing so, you go with a taller, not as tall as the football, it's a little bit shorter than what's in the football, but it's a denser grass mix for your grass areas. And then for your clay areas, you're going with a shorter tuft height, the shorter turf, and you change the infill in it a little bit, makes it a little harder, so the ball coming off of it acts more like a ball coming off of clay, dirt. We also, I think they had a 5-quarter board treated as a termination point. From experience, we know that those don't last very long. You'll be replacing that entire thing at or before you replace your turf. They're just not made for direct burial. So we called out for recycled plastic that will not degrade, will not rot, as the termination board. So they're just little things like that make it act more like a true baseball field. They give you the longevity that you're paying for, so you don't have to replace all that stuff. Whenever the turf is replaced, you might be able to reuse those anchor points and things of that nature that we were able to detail and provide them with that information. And they go, oh, okay, well, that's not what we priced.
So with the 1.3 price, what is in the existing project that we would not be utilizing to bring that down any, or is that price including
That includes
the credits? That includes credits, okay.
And moving the irrigation system over to the practice fields.
Correct.
Okay, so the irrigation system for both fields going to it's not as big, the practice field's not as big as both those fields, so you're just
We're going
moving.
to irrigate all the grass between the baseball field and softball field, not just the practice
Oh,
field
okay.
itself. We were just going to go ahead. Now, you can do that and just turn the heads over, but we thought it would make more usable space, especially the coach says, start giving me some laps.
Well, and you
That's some
do also
goals.
in there's some track events in between the practice field and the softball
You
field.
got
too,
shot
correct?
put,
Shot put,
discus.
discus, and the javelin.
So all the grass between the two fields. the baseball
Probably the
field and
visual
softball
effect
field.
of it.
And there might be a small credit factor. If you understand, we're already where people are buying materials and they're trying to work on things, or we've got shop drawings.
They've got the materials. You'd be getting the heads, sprinkler heads would just be given to you to use as replacement heads at this point.
Mr. Christian, what interest the interest that we have, how much is that?
I didn't bring those figures with me tonight.
630 something, seemed like to me is what,
If I can just make one more statement, just so that everybody's aware of it, we did not change the grading at all on these fields. They're originally designed to be natural grass fields, and they have this slope on them for that drainage. We did not flatten them to make them synthetic. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that, so you don't go out and think that you're getting a flat, a flat or a low slope 3/4% field. Because we're just too late in the game. The light poles are set, foul poles are set, dugouts are in.
So it still have a little slope to it.
It's still going to have slope to it. Now, we can flatten the infield out a little bit, but your outfield is still going to have the slope on it as a natural grass field. The When the base is in, we can tweak. It's from the bases out that you're stuck.
So is there any dirt on the field at all, like around the bases, or is it all synthetic?
Also, there's no clay at all anymore.
We'll get a color change.
Well, Kentucky Proud Park, that's their biggest complaint. And it was, they wanted the clay mound, but the biggest complaint is trying to maintain the clay mound and then clean the turf, clean the clay off the turf
Turf.
from
Yeah.
the pitchers walking in and out, practice. And I wouldn't be surprised if they switch sometime in the near future.
You were asking about the interest at the time of the last meeting that we have not used it, so it would have gone up a little bit. $373,841 on the gym stadium side, and $241,811 on the Fieldhouse side, for a total of $615,652. And I will tell you that we still need to purchase, big purchases we have left on equipment and things. We have weights for the weight rooms, we have track equipment. That's the two most major things that we have right now.
Scoreboards.
Scoreboards.
Still have contingency funds. in
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
That's outside.
That
just-
was
at
just the
end.
interest on the money that was sitting there. That's the contingency. And we still have about right at 150,000 furniture and equipment on the field house side. And about 298,000 in contingency on the field house, somewhere in that area. And you've got, we were showing, now we have made some expenses since the last meeting on this 491,000 contingency on the, what you did on those change orders has got to come off of that. So, on the,
It's on the gym.
on the gym. Yeah.
So my question is, so if we used, what is your plan? How would we fund this? Would we use the interest plus what?
Well-
What's your opinion and recommendation?
I want to make sure that we've got enough left to do everybody the way we did for the football stadium and not meeting all their needs. And we've taken care of some of the other sides, those have been done. Like I said, the scoreboards, that's going to be about 62,000. There's a couple of change orders you're looking at on here tonight that's going to reduce that change order, but that has to do with the scoreboards for baseball. There's a change on there that has to do with
The
that.
contingency fund, I thought it was my understanding we could not use that for turf, that any of the construction money couldn't be used, only that interest money.
Well, it has been a constant struggle to understand exactly how KDE is going to look at any of this. One of the conversations I had with Greg Dunbar, their facilities, is that the last money spent, which will always be your contingency that's left, is the most restricted funds. So when he rules that has really caused a problem with, you have local money or even general fund dollars, or you put all kind of money into the pot, and they're saying they're using it for things like the regular classrooms or whatever, and then you come back and look at the contingency and say, oh, now that's the most restricted SFCC money. And even when that happened on another high school that we were doing, we went right to SFCC and asked and made a request to expend the funds. And when they saw everything else that had happened, they granted it for things like weight room equipment, scoreboards, for another high school. Okay, where they were using their contingency, Mr. Dunbar had said, well, that's going to be the most restricted fund. We're like, okay, then we'll just jump through the hoop. So, yes, I don't know, when you're talking about your current contingency, we had local bond sale and a lot of cash that we put in this project that was from, your general fund. And so, whether we could argue that, hey, we're still using, or still want to use some of that general fund cash.
Some of the contingency monies as part of that cash that we put in.
Cash, right, that would be applied toward this, and especially, I would argue very vehemently that the interest earnings would be coming back to the district and going back into your general fund.
Yeah, so those are, I mean, I don't think that's part of
I don't think
the
that's a
question.
question.
That's
I
not
just
a
think
question there.
Right.
no.
The contingency I was a little worried about because I thought we did pay for the football turf out of our general fund is what I
Yes, we
thought.
did have a specific line item, knowing that the turf was.
We went into it
something that
knowing
would
that.
not be bonded. And the argument for that, just so you understand, is that you can't have a 20-year bond sale if it's not, you think it's gonna last, 8 or 10 years, 10 years. So the Department of Education just came back and said, look, we'll, and we're having some discussions about this, but we'll allow you to do the drainage system and some of the underground work, but it's the carpet, the actual turf itself, that's not gonna last as long as your bond. And so everything else that's below that does last. And so they've been okay with using that money. So they've always just been adamant about making sure you've got dollars to cover the turf, the carpet itself.
Which is just a reminder that whatever turf we put down, we have to know going into it that that'll have to be replaced. In
Right.
10 or 15 years, we're probably gonna
Correct.
go longer for baseball.
Right, I think that's right, we talked last week.
In some areas, yes, in other areas, no. Baseball, your high wear areas, you.
But included in this is for some of those high wear areas, there's sets of replacements, at least 2 replacements in
Two
every,
replacements
in every one of the high
for your-
usage areas.
Right.
So around home plate.
Home
first
plate
base,
base,
Home plate,
pitcher's mound.
stride area on the mound, first base leadoff, second, third base slide.
Batter's boxes,
Batter's
catcher's
box,
box,
pitcher's
pitcher's
box.
mound.
Just the stride area. if we could.
Yes.
I'd like to go way around the bend back to the beginning, which is the way it's spec'd right now, which is none of this. These are all upgrades, which is simply just seeded. So I think what's the probability that if we threw plenty of water to it, that we could seed it and it would be ready to play in March? Does anyone have an opinion on that?
I would say
Not gonna
0 at
happen.
this point.
Zero.
There's no way.
Okay, so then the next step up from that is sod.
Yes.
You got 66,000 is the sod number on there from last week. What is the sod number this week? Is it still 66,000?
Yeah, I don't have a
They
breakout.
didn't send a breakout, they just sent the total.
Total cost.
And that 66,000 was a number we got from a local sod farm
Side farm.
out on Cleveland Pike that had 5 acres of what was needed.
Athletic
to be able
land
to
turf.
Harvest rolled goods versus,
And we're happy, if that's, again, I'm worried about the money. If that's the money that we wanted to spend on that sod, that particular species of sod is.
It's an athletic blend.
It's an athletic blend.
Yeah.
Okay.
It needs to be the rolled.
What's in my
I'm sorry,
front
the
yard right now,
rolled.
which is weeds, we'd put down something that's appropriate for it.
It's an athletic blend that is showing a lot of promise and longevity and survival through the winter.
Well, do you think 66,000 is still a reasonable number?
Well, I think there's going to be, that's directly from the supplier. There's always going to be markup through, Vesio, because they have to, work on the installation and the management of all that. If they have any of it that die, they got to deal with it. And then Rising Sun obviously has to manage that. So, that's, if you're doing a DPO just
Normal
for it, that's
15%
what it'd be.
markup on whatever costs are, it's 15%.
Was there, do we need to add a 15% markup on these other items?
There's going to be that much of them
These numbers are all in that.
in that one.
All right, so-
Yeah, that's what I said.
well, some of the new numbers that we got from Vesio won't have like the design numbers and stuff like for all the work that we've been doing and or for the management for Cometal
Contract price.
construction,
So what is that number? Is that 8%?
about 8%.
So we need to, even if we took this top end number, then we need to add another 8% onto that.
Correct.
Okay. And circling back to the softball infield. We're not an attorney. Ryan is. Again, I'm wondering whether, if we didn't sod the infield, we didn't put artificial turf on the infield of softball, what sort of savings we might be able to gain from that?
State that again, I'm sorry.
UK softball field, infield is dirt. We're talking about putting sod on the infield.
For softball.
Sod's just for the outfield, softball.
Okay, how about turf? If we did
Synthetic.
artificial turf,
That would be infield
Okay.
and outfield. Or just, the first number is artificial turf on the infield, sod on the outfield. That's the first number.
Okay. Is there a variation of this 521,000 that for softball restores that back to dirt on the infield? So we would have sod on the outfield of both fields, softball, baseball, artificial turf on baseball infield, but dirt on softball infield.
I don't think you've got it.
I can break that, get it broken down, I don't have it.
We don't have it today, but we can get it. They had it created, so it's out there.
Well, I've thought about this thing, and I've been everywhere, and I've talked to a lot of people, and I've been all over the place. I've talked to Ron several times about, different things, and, to me, at this point right here, I'm wholeheartedly for turfing the entire thing. And I think, my reasons for that are, I look at a lot of things that we've built over the years, and I go out to them and I say, and most of the time, I'll say, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do this? And why didn't they do this? And I think I just want this facility for people to walk out there and say, man, I'm glad they did this. And from my standpoint for the board, I'm all in on turf myself. And I know it's a big number, but I know that I've sat on this board for several years and watched us not spend anything on kids. And I think it's the time to do it.
Well, I've thought about it, and I think I'm in full favor of turfing both fields. And my reasoning is, when I ran for board, it was to represent my district, the community, and the school, and everyone in the district, in the school district. But also wanted to see what we could do as a school system to help our community, and to showcase our community. And I think lifelong resident, we really don't have a lot of things here in Clark County to point to and say, hey, look at this. Look what we have done for our kids and our community and everyone here in Winchester. I think this is something that the community can point to and say, wow, look at that, look at the high school. When families look to locate here, first thing they're going to do is, look at our facilities in our district. And, kids that go through, every kid's going to go through our middle school and our high school. And they're going to look at these facilities. And I'm hoping that if the board passes this and chooses to move forward, that it will bring more people in our community. Businesses will thrive. There's going to be more tournaments. There's going to be more things that we can do at our facilities that we've never done before. And I think it's hard to put a price on that and know what kind of impact that's going to be, but there will be an impact. So I'm in full favor of it.
I've given a lot of thought in the last week, and certainly you all raised very valid points, but unfortunately, there's only a limited amount of funds that we have available to us. And the current facility plan has projects such as the preschool and additional renovations to Campbell that they're batter up next, to use our baseball, softball analogy. And if we spend the money on this, then we don't have to roll forward to the next project. The project we're sitting on right now, we've benefited from contingency roll forwards going into it. So I think our money would be better spent on more educational related items, which would be preschool, Campbell, other items that on the facility plan. And that's so I just cannot spend in all good consciousness the extra $800,000, good conscience, on artificial turf on the outfield. since I'm a realist, I probably could realistically say, to balance all the concerns, and you all have very valid concerns, to do turf on the infield and sod the outside. I'm realistically comfortable with that, but I can't take $800,000 plus 8% from these next two projects. And especially knowing that we're not at the end of the gym project. We just saw, last 2 months, a lot of contingency things pop up just like weeds in my front yard, that we're gonna need those, we're gonna need these funds for when we get to November and December. So I respect your all's thoughts, and mine's similar, but just a bit of a variation on it.
Well, I think initially I was leaning towards turfing the infields of both. But when you saw the crowds come to the first football game, that's huge for people in this community. And I think our children deserve it to do turf, infield, and outfield. And I think it would greatly promote our schools to people coming into the community. I think it'd be a great asset, and it would put the finishing touches on the project. So I'd vote to do the entire project turf.
Then y'all get to District 5 after everybody's already said.
Say the best for last.
Well, I've been all the way around in a circle and as always a mess. But I see where Scott's coming from and I was on board. And then I read the newspaper article and then I started reading the comments and seeing what the community had to say. And then I started talking to people and then I have a little boy that's playing baseball, which put me right there with a lot of that. And I'm gonna have to agree that both infield and outfield, because Bear, being one of them, will hold me to this. When I started this, I said, if we're gonna do it, let's do it right. Let's do it the one good time, and that's what we need to do.
Blame it on me.
It's your fault, Bear, because I know you'll be calling me, no.
Haven't spoken about it.
No, we have not. No.
That's for the record.
I'm going to add something here because we have been talking about this in our office and thought about this and looked at this, and we thought it was important to get as good a numbers as we could together, for you to have this evening. And in looking at things, I know it was important for Leif to be able to describe that we don't have the money in there to try to change the grades of this massive outfield. But the comment as we were talking is that the artificial turf would provide a lot more variety of athletes or band members or community people to be on the artificial turf, that you'd have a hard time convincing a coach to let you get on if it was natural turf. So when you're talking about, like right now, the big band competition that's about to happen, we're talking about allowing the tennis courts to be used, in some preliminary state. I mean, we're talking about getting the asphalt base down, but not putting the finish down, and the coating. You probably don't want a band out there when the tennis courts are done. Between the nets and the coating itself, they would destroy it. Now you would have the opportunity to put band or other, like I said, out on that turf, and it not be damaged. I mean, whether it was wet or not wet, or it would be possible, to have a lot more happen out there, whether it's track and field or whether it's, PE. I mean, there's just so much that's going to be available if you go that extra step. Okay? And it's hard for us. I mean, for me, it was personally tough because we've not had the opportunity to do a full artificial turf baseball, softball facility for a high school.
Because, just to say it again, because you haven't done one.
I don't think there's one that exists,
Lafayette, or not Lafayette, excuse me, Lexington Catholic, because they're landlocked.
private.
They have one.
But wouldn't it be nice for this community to set the pace instead of being so far down the line.
I think it's more important to put the money in the preschool than to put it in a artificial turf outfield. Well, so this might mean put it off another year. Think of the impact on the children.
Yeah, but I think you're only speculating, Scott. I mean, you're just saying, I mean, that's not to say we're not gonna have money for that. You don't sacrifice one project because you think it's gonna hurt the next project right there. You know, this right here is just a showcase for our community. And, you know, when you look at it, you know, it's pay me now, pay me later. It looks like, you know, when I go through the cost, when I talk to people on crews, you know, you're gonna pay out in water and pay out in maintenance and stuff over the years, so you're just gonna pay a little bit at a time. So you're really not looking at much difference of if we kept it the other way. Plus, we have something to be proud of, and we have something we can play on all the time. And it's basically turnkey ready when they open the gates. Every time that we open the gates for that, I just, you know, to sit here and to say, for me to sit here and say, oh, we need to save this money for this other project, when we don't even know anything about the other project as right now, or even what we're gonna do on the other project. Let's do this right, then let's talk about what's right the next time. And to try to shame somebody into saying these kids and this, I mean, you know, these kids, you know, this is important. We've never had it. We've lived here, these people here on this board have lived here all our lives, and we've waited for something like this. And that's the emotional part of it for us.
I certainly wasn't trying to shame anybody at all. I was just trying to draw a contrast that if we spend the money on this, then we won't have it.
You speculate that you won't
We
have it.
absolutely won't
You
have it. If we
speculate
spend it on
that you
this
won't
mess, we
have
won't
it. You
have
know,
it
we
for the
listen to
next
people
project.
say you can't build a high school because we're spending too much money, because we don't have textbooks. You're taking away from kids because you're building a high school. Look at what we got. You know, I don't think anybody's looking to shortchange the next project. We don't even know what the next project is. You know, I mean, it's just like, you know, let's buy half a gallon of milk this week because we may not be able to afford it next week. I don't know. I mean, let's take care of things now. It's my thoughts, and I certainly appreciate people wanting to save money. I don't have any problem with that. But at the same time, I've seen this board that I've sat on for 4 years just sit on money. Just sit on money and not spend it on anybody. And that's not what we're here for. When we get that tax dollar in, people, you know, don't like paying taxes anyway, but when we get that tax dollar in, they expect that to be spent on kids. And when you're sitting there, and I know we want a good, healthy contingency, we still got a good, healthy contingency. You know, we can say like, well, we had $17 million, you know, 3 years ago. Well, okay, but we spent it on good things. We finally got to where we're going to spend some of it. And that's exactly what it's supposed to be. I mean, if every year we could end at zero every year and then start all over and go again, that would be perfect for me. But we've got plenty of money. We're healthy right now in everything that we do. And our next project will be healthy as well. And I sincerely believe that. But I don't want to take away from this project because we think what the next project may be when we're at least a year and a half, 2 years before we'd ever break ground on anything such as that.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask, is, you know, the facilities committee, the new facilities committee hasn't even been formed yet.
We're forming it currently, but it's going to be, hopefully we would have the majority of the committee members in place that I can report to you at the next board meeting.
Okay.
That report, that committee, the final report is due back to KDE by April of next year.
So they have until April next year to put together
Plan,
a recommendation, and all indications are preschool will probably be part of that.
I'm certain it's a big part of it.
It's always been part of it.
Yeah,
It's always been.
and so was the remodel, the completion of.
So by the time it goes through the whole process, we're looking at, what, 2 years or a year and a half from now?
I can't imagine that you could get to the point of starting to do any kind of construction before next year and a half.
So what does that do to our bonding potential between now and then?
We'll have Mr. Nance in at the facility committee, but I'll also schedule him in to talk to you guys. He's very conservative, and he's estimating that within 2 years from now, we would probably be at somewhere around that 8 to to 10 to 11 million in bonding potential.
And I think there's so many issues that committee's gonna have to talk about.
Yeah.
And you alluded to it here, Bill, and we talked about, we gained 140 students this year.
Yeah.
What if people do move in?
Yeah.
And what are you
Well,
gonna do? Well, you
I'll
may
tell
need another elementary school. I mean, there's a lot of things for a facilities committee to look out.
I'm getting
look at.
concerned if you drive up in behind, up a Strode, back in behind Strode, and look at what's going on back in there. It's a good thing to be worried about. There's a subdivision going in there, which,
I just think there's just a lot of questions for that later on. And again, I'm just not for holding money back here because we may use it later. So at this point, Mr. Christie, if we wanted to do a motion, are we don't have a number as of right now. Are we just asking our architects to go ahead with the planning of this?
I don't think that you would need a motion to direct them to move forward with
And
it.
do we have to mention something about funding? We're expecting this funding to come from our interest, from our contingency, from our general fund? I mean, is that kind of, it doesn't look like it's going to be an exact motion because we don't really know the entire process, but I'm sure that when you get to BG1 or BG ready or whatever and come back to us, that's when we'll actually approve.
I mean, our expectation, or what we really needed this evening, would be for it to be a direction to proceed with a complete artificial turf and prepare the revised BG1 to accompany that. And that way we'll have the time to get all those numbers finalized and get with central office.
And my expectation would be we would be able to do that at the next regularly scheduled meeting, which is 2 to 3 weeks from now. Is that a fair amount of time, I think, to get
I
that?
think so.
And so you'd have final numbers for that, and then it would be concretely approved.
It'd be everything. It'd be just like what you have here coming up for your next two items. We'd have a formal change order with all the numbers from Rising Sun, have a supplemental change form, would have all of, our numbers in terms of soft costs, that 8%-ish, and then have, the revised BG1, because KB will want to see, okay, well, how are you funding that? And we can have that, start that conversation with them.
I think the motion would need to be that it's the intent of the board to move forward with the turf of the complete turf of both fields. And that starts everything else into motion. And stops some of the other things that's already in motion.
I'll give it a shot. We ready for a motion?
I'm ready.
I'll make a motion for the board to direct our architect to move forward with providing a revised BG1 to provide turf for both the baseball, provide turf for the entire baseball and softball fields.
Have a motion by Mr. Talby,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Richardson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Item passes 4-1. Item number 4, consider approval of change order 44 to Structural Steel Services for the George Rogers Park High School Gym and Athletic Field Project, BG 16-238, an amount of $25,371. Mr. Christie.
Recommendation to approve the change order. This is the cable rail system we've been around the top section of the gymnasium that we've been working on now for a long time, and it's substantially down. I don't think it's going to, anything else is going to be able to be done to lower this. This is way less than half of what it originally started out at. So the recommendation would be to approve that change order.
Board member questions, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Heisel, second by Ms. Ritchie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 5, consider approving change order 405 structural steel services for the GRC Gymnasium Athletics Village Project BG 16238 in the amount of $11,878. Mr. Christie.
Recommendation to approve the change order. This is for the structural steel to support the scoreboards and video boards inside the gymnasium. At the time of the design, we didn't have that equipment we do now. We know what the requirements of it are, and this meets the requirements for hanging that.
Board member questions or comments?
We have approved already the electrical
Yes.
requirements for
For
that, right?
hooking them up there.
No other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Talby, second by Ms. Ritchie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. Internal board business, item number 6, consider approval for additional funding for schools. It's one of the things that I had talked about before, and we kind of put it on another agenda. Do board members want to move forward with this, or are there other ideas that you may have?
I've received a couple of proposals, and I like the fact that the principals are putting together proposals and saying what they're going to do with the money. Not sure, what we're asking to do tonight. I like the idea. I think there's some things out there. I guess one of my questions is, they're asking for things that, why didn't they just put that in their budget? I guess that's why I'm asking. Like Chromebooks, why wouldn't they ask that in their?
Well, they do have a certain amount of them in, but this would speed, they have a process at all the schools, a plan of getting to a certain point of Chromebooks and those kinds of things, and it's a plan that takes a little bit further each year. I think what you're seeing from some of these, the additional funds would speed that process up for them, and some of this stuff is what that amounts to. It's part of their plan that they originally do. It's not something that they just come up with to use this. It's just going to speed the plan up, which means whatever that amount that's spent on the Chromebooks this year to do that, then they probably wouldn't have to do that next year. That would free up for something else.
Is there any help with technology they'll get with?
Yes, there is.
Is there?
There is with some of the technologies. Now, I don't know if the Chromebooks gets KITS reimbursement. I'm not sure on the Chromebooks whether we get on the portable devices, but on a lot of the infrastructure and the things that's gone into place to make it possible for these to operate, yeah, there was matching funds and stuff.
Yes, some of the concerns, just like Mr. Talby has, for me, I mean, I'm really concerned when I hear things from principals of teachers working at workstations that are 10 years old and why we're not rotating things through or what we have. And I know technology is an expensive deal, but 10 years is a long time for a teacher to keep a workstation. And we probably don't have the people here that can answer that question tonight or whatever, but it is to me kind of concerning when I see some of these things on here, because I was kind of thinking a little bit different for what some of these funds may be spent for. And I know I think one school even had stipends on there and things, and I know I specifically said that I didn't want to do anything, but then, again, that's me. I mean, all this was just my presentation, and I'm not trying to force it on anybody. All I'm trying to do is get the money into the hands of our leaders to be able to spend on kids. I have no idea what their PTOs are raising money for. I've looked at some of the fundraising applications been out there, and it seems like technology is always on that list as well. I do want to make sure that if we do give some money, that we do have some kind of proposal from each of these schools, and then maybe have those principals come back January, February when we do our tentative budgets and talk about, what kind of effects this money had on their school and what we can do next year for them before we get started. I'd kind of like to be able to see that. I think the last time we did money, I don't know that we ever got any kind of feedback from principals. So I think if I saw a proposal and then again turned around in January and we got some kind of feedback from the effects of that, and also what they want the board to do to help them going forward, so. Again, again, you know, you're not hurting my feelings on this, we say, no, let's move on. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I mean, I'm just trying to throw some ideas out there and see if we can do some things, because I know a lot of these things are needed within the schools.
Well, I agree. I think I'd really like to see us be able to give this to the schools. I'd like almost to see, you know, what their thinking is, what they like to spend it on, and I'd like for them not to be able to roll it over, for them to be able to spend it within the time frame that we, because like we say, you know, money saved is not helping the children. So I'd like to see if they could.
Do you think it would help if, you know, I don't try to put more work on principals, but I guess it does, if they had put some kind of proposal together about what their goals are this year and what they're trying to raise money for this year, and just kind of build into that? I'm not, you know, I don't know. I mean,
I don't know, receipt two, I don't know how many you got.
I received
I've
two.
got
I'd like to
three.
see at least some.
I've got three.
I'm looking at,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
Baker has some big, you know,
Big goals, yeah.
big requests, and, you know, well, I shouldn't say big, but some, you know, like $30,000 for the orchestra and for the band, and they have a lot of kids enrolled in those, you know, those two groups that, you know, is there equipment that, I mean, is it that bad? I mean, if it is, we probably should take a look at, you know, look at that. They have some big requests overall, so,
I know a lot of times the high school works with them, and I know the last time, I think when we put some money in there with orchestra,
Some of it went to
it
middle
filtered down into the middle schools, either, or junior high and the intermediate schools as well. And, you know, to me, anytime we can put money that gets kids involved in something, I think it's a good thing, and I think there's definitely a need for it. If we still want to continue looking at this, I'm all for doing this. If we want to ask something of principals, a little bit more, maybe we should.
Or can we give them some guidelines, like, you know, not using it for the stipends that we like for it to be?
That was a discussion I had with the principals and the staff when I met with the principals and talked about this possibility that the expectation would be that it would be for materials or equipment for the students and staff,
Last time we
and
did
would not
something,
be.
They wouldn't let us put you couldn't say you cannot use it for.
No, but I think along with what Mr. Peridot or Mr. Tarby said, I would like to see the principals submit something in writing. But to get them to do that, I think you're going to put some parameters on them, you know, what, just one can be no stipends, but how much? Because you saw what you got from Baker, and when you start opening that door,
yeah.
I mean, it can go.
I think it would be a
They
good
need to prioritize.
I think it would be a good start just to ask, you know, what is your PTO raising money for? Because obviously they've had to sit down and, you know, most of the time PTOs sit down and ask the principals, what's your biggest goals right now? What do you want us to raise money for? And maybe find out what they're fundraising for right now. And almost every school, I think, has a school-wide fundraiser for something. And I think if we find out those things, we can kind of touch on a little bit of what they may need.
I've got a staff meeting coming up with just the principals again in the next couple of weeks. I mean, I can,
I think that might be a good place to start.
what's the PTOs, what are they, or their fundraisers, what are they going toward? I want to look into the 10-year-old teacher workstations.
Those should be small.
Well, I just think, you know, I think there's some things, and maybe, you know, this is gonna take getting together with technology and some other people to talk about some of these things.
But I always find it interesting, you know, you'll get that comment, my teacher workstations are 10-year-old, but then when you get, all right, you've got $100,000 in your building use, prioritize.
Right.
Teacher workstations
That's
aren't
true.
there.
And those are
So
things that we don't know, and I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I'm saying, is that, you know, when I just see things like that, you know, I'm sitting here thinking, well, maybe we should address this before on this level and talk about that, I think. But I just think if we just kind of ask principals right now and kind of get a good feel for them on that, and, you know, and we'll continue to work on this, because I don't think this has to be immediate or anything, but we'll continue to work on this when we get some of those things back from them. So I don't really think we need to proceed on with this until later, I guess. If everybody's okay with that, just moving on.
Do you, so are you gonna have the conversation
Yep.
then? Is that
Talk about what
you're gonna do?
PTAs are doing. I'll talk about no stipends, but what are the needs? What are your needs? What would be your plans for this, and prioritize those needs. And then also talk to them about, there's going to be some feedback to you in January or February or whatever months down the road. How did it impact? You know, and is there more that needs to be done in this area, that kind of thing.
PTOs and boosters.
Yeah, the PTO with boosters and PTO, yeah.
And again, I think I just received 2, and some of the board members received 3 proposals from 3 different principals, so.
And I think those are you know, I don't think, because we didn't really require
No,
anybody to send
I-
one. I think they were just, some of the ones were getting a little anxious, I
Yeah,
believe.
they just heard, they watched it and saw that there was, so they bypassed, and so what I would ask is let me collect those, and I'll give, in my update to you, I'll give you an update of all the requests from each building, so we'll have one from every building.
And we do have test reporting coming up and some things right there, and it may be a good idea to maybe combine all that in together maybe, because we have separate meetings for some of the testing things as well, to talk about that. Maybe we can put some parameters in their report, they can put in there about what the board can do for them. I think in years past, we may ask them there, but they don't have any preparation before we get in here, but maybe that can be.
Needs, yeah, it's always technology. You know, that's what
Yeah,
I
well,
always-
technology's a
Always
expensive and
change.
needed part. All right, no action on that, and just for consideration of other meetings and there. Item number 7 would be to adjourn to closed session for KRS 61810, subsection 1, subsection F. I don't have the exact wording. I'll read that wording there, and if somebody wants to. Discussions or hearing which may lead to appointment, discipline, or dismissal of individual employee, member, or student without restricting that employee, members, or student's right to a public hearing if requested. I don't think I had to read all that, but I think just that first part. Just that first part, I think is good
I'll make
stuff.
that motion.
All right, motion by Ms. Ritchie,
I'll second.
all those in favor say aye. All right, we will, let's take about a 5-minute break if you want to, and then we'll come back into closed session. So we're in a 5-minute recess right now.